Again, I welcome you. Making the move from high school to what happens next can be confusing. Making that move during a worldwide pandemic is extra confusing. This presentation provides an overview of special education rights and high school transition process. As part of the Clark County Start Now Transition Training Series for the 2020-21 school year, I hope this training establishes a foundation for supporting young people while they're still in high school, through graduation, and into adulthood. My name is Jerry Clark, and I am a Parent Resource Coordinator with Parent Training and Information, PTI, at Washington PAVE. PAVE stands for Partnerships for Action, Voices for Empowerment. This evening, I'm coming to you from my home office in Vancouver, Washington. I have blonde hair with reddish highlights and giant black earphones, and I'm wearing a gray sweater because it's a bit chilly today. So Washington PAVE is a nonprofit agency that has supported families in Washington since 1979. Our home office is in Tacoma, and we have resource coordinators throughout the state who provide support and training related to special education. Our PTI is funded with a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. But please note that the contents of this presentation do not necessarily represent the policies of the U.S. Department, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. PAVE is not a legal service agency and cannot provide advocacy, advice, or legal representation. Our goal is to empower families by providing information and access to resources. I will provide some additional information about how to access support from PAVE at the end of the presentation. Please note that PAVE supports the Black Lives Matter movement and includes a statement of solidarity and commitment to action on our website homepage. Tonight's program starts with general information about the rights of students with disabilities, including guidance related to the pandemic. We'll talk about tools available for students preparing for adult life and strategies for self-advocacy. The end of the presentation includes resources for further information. Please note that no federal or state agency has waived any of the protections for students with disabilities in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many services are being provided differently during this pandemic, but no student rights or disability rights have been waived. Some families face barriers related to language access. Under state and federal law, all parents have the right to information about their child's education in a language they can understand, and students have a right to accessible learning materials. The Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI, provides guidance about language access rights that is available in multiple languages. Here are a few examples of documents that families can expect to receive in their native languages: meeting invitations, evaluation results, the document that describes a student's individualized education program, the IEP, and the prior written notice, sometimes called PWN, which schools are required to provide after a meeting to summarize the discussion and highlight any agreements, disagreements, or changes to a student's individualized program. Education rights are like a pyramid, and students who qualify at the top of the pyramid have all of these protections. At the bottom of the pyramid is ESSA, which stands for Every Student Succeeds Act. Sometimes we call it ESSA. ESSA guarantees access to a free public education to ensure that every child achieves. In the middle of this student rights pyramid is the Rehabilitation Act, passed in 1973. It includes Section 504. This law provides civil rights protections for individuals with identified disabilities throughout the lifespan. Accommodations are required to support equitable access to public facilities and programs. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, also provides lifetime protections against disability discrimination. At the top of the pyramid is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which provides a plan for appropriate special education services. Students who are evaluated and found eligible will have an IEP, which is required to include a transition plan by age 16. More information about equity rights is available from the Office for Civil Rights, which is housed within the U.S. Department of Education. Note that Title II of the ADA prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability by public entities, regardless of whether they receive federal funds. Section 504 and ADA protections extend to individuals with disabilities that even if they are not fully explored or labeled, and these civil rights protections are for the lifespan. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act states that no otherwise qualified individual with a disability in the United States shall, solely by reason of her or his disability, be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity that receives federal financial assistance. Part A of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which I will refer to as IDEA, describes the law's overarching principles and purposes. Special education is provided to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free and appropriate public education, FAPE, designed to meet their individual needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. Pardon me. In other words, supporting the transition into adult life is part of a school's basic responsibility. I'm just grabbing a quick drink of water. There are 6 general themes outlined in the IDEA. Understanding these principles can help families in their advocacy. The first, again, is free appropriate public education, FAPE, which is the entitlement of a student receiving special education services. Services are developed based on results of a comprehensive evaluation process. And part 3, delivered through an IEP. individualized education program. The school district is responsible to provide FAPE in the least restrictive environment. That means services are delivered to the student within general education to the maximum extent appropriate. Number 5, parents and students are protected as fully participating members of an IEP team. And 6, families have the right to dispute school district decisions. Those conflict options are described in the procedural safeguards. The concept of FAPE, free appropriate public education, became the overarching principle of special education law when the IDEA was passed by the United States Congress in 1990. Lawmakers used the word FAPE to describe what a special education student is entitled to receive, an education that is uniquely designed and appropriate in light of the unique circumstances of disability. Virtually every conversation about a student's special education program is about FAPE. A good question to consider is, what truly makes the IEP appropriate to meet the specific student's needs? A student has a right to FAPE regardless of the nature or the severity of a disability, and the local school district is responsible to provide FAPE. An appropriate transition plan is part of FAPE. Administration of the federal law has been impacted by various legal rulings over the years. An example is a 2017 Supreme Court ruling referred to as Andrew F., which is the name of a child whose parents sued the school. The Supreme Court ruled that trivial progress toward goals does not meet the standard of FAPE. The ruling also included firm language to reinforce progress toward grade level standards and parent participation in IEP process. The court's wording included key phrases highlighted in purple on this slide. This slide includes a question families might consider, and it summarizes the student rights that we've reviewed so far in this presentation. What makes learning accessible in an equitable way to enable a student to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances? Inclusion is also a key aspect of the law, as is preparation for adult life. The hope is that a student is included from the very beginning of education so that inclusion in the adult community is a logical progression out of high school. While the IDEA does not mandate inclusion, it does indicate a strong preference for students with disabilities to learn alongside their peers without disabilities in the least restrictive environment. The National Association of State Directors of Special Education provides a brief about LRE, least restrictive environment, during COVID-19 and distance learning. The handout includes general language about least restrictive environment, including this statement: the removal from the general education environment only occurs if the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in the general education classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. So family members can ask, what does general education look like for a student in the environment of continuous learning? And how is the special education student being supported to access what all students are receiving? OSPI provides a booklet of special education guidance for schools and families in the 2020-2021 school year. A link to that booklet is included on this slide, which shows the cover of that document. A section of the booklet describes options for recovery services to support students who may fall behind on IEP goals because of the circumstances of the pandemic. Careful record keeping is important. To determine whether recovery services are needed, IEP teams will need documentation to, 1, review progress toward IEP goals, and that includes transition goals, and 2, assess progress toward grade level standards in the general education curriculum. The booklet shown on the previous slide is summarized in a 4-page document provided by OSPI and linked to this slide. A link is also searchable on OSPI's page called Special Education Guidance for COVID-19. OSPI's guidance includes specific information about graduation and secondary transition. As always, every student is required to have a high school and beyond plan. And special education students should have a plan that aligns with the IEP transition plan. Career exploration is a required element of that process. Note that recovery services may be available to students who graduated or aged out during the pandemic before receiving all of the services that are listed as part of their IEP transition program. Here's a little more detail about recovery services. Recovery services are a new option that was developed by the state to address unique circumstances related to the pandemic. Recovery services are likely provided outside of regular school, but might be concurrent depending on the needs of the student. OSPI has stressed that recovery services should not interfere with access to the general education curriculum or other new and ongoing learning opportunities. According to OSPI, the extent of a student's recovery services, if needed, must be an individualized determination made by the IEP team considering individual student needs in the context of instructional opportunities provided to all students during the school facility closures. Recovery services are not the same as compensatory services, which are educational opportunities provided outside of regular school to make up for IEP services that were not provided, even though the student was available to receive them. Generally, a student might qualify for compensatory services if it is determined that the standard of FAPE, free appropriate public education, was not fully met in the provision of special education. An IEP team can decide to include compensatory services in a student's plan, or the state might require compensatory services upon resolution of a complaint process. Again, a student who aged out of high school transition services by graduating or turning 21 during COVID-19 may be eligible to come back to receive compensatory and/or recovery services. Distance learning has generated some new vocabulary. Two terms that are important to understand are synchronous and asynchronous instruction. Synchronous instruction is delivered through an online platform, by phone, at school, or another way that a teacher can directly instruct a student or a group of students in real time. Asynchronous instruction might be a lesson recorded by a teacher or could be a packet of curricula for independent or parent-supported learning. The lessons are designed and overseen by school staff, even if they're not directly present during the learning time. So IEP teams can consider how to support both synchronous and asynchronous instruction through specially designed instruction, accommodations, and modifications that are individualized to meet a student's needs. Families can help track what is provided and whether the learning is inclusive, accessible, and appropriately designed to support progress appropriate for a student with a special education program. OSPI is the state educational agency charged with overseeing and supporting Washington's 295 public school districts and 7 state tribal education compact schools. As communities respond to the COVID-19 outbreak, OSPI offers a page that is committed to COVID-19 related resources and guidance for both schools and families. I hope you feel like you have some basic understanding about the laws that protect your child's right to FAPE, a free, appropriate public education. Remember that an appropriate education includes a well-planned transition out of school. Now we're going to talk about some of the more technical aspects of planning for the high school transition. The state of Washington requires schools to proactively help all students get ready for their lives beyond public school. A high school and beyond plan is required to begin by 8th grade for all Washington students. The plan includes career forecasting, community engagement, and much more. The state requires that the high school and beyond plan supports transition programming for a student with an IEP. And a transition plan is required in the IEP by the school year when a student turns 16. Additionally, a young person in Washington might get pre-employment or employment services from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, DVR. A DVR counselor might participate in the IEP work group. Another tool to support a young person is person-centered planning. Additionally, school to work is available in many counties for students eligible for support from the Developmental Disabilities Administration, DDA. Families can ask DDA and school case managers for more information about school to work programs. OSPI provides access to a template for the high school and beyond plan and additional information about that requirement. OSPI also provides model forms to support schools and families when they are developing an IEP. This form shows what could be included in an IEP when transition programming is added. This section of the model form highlights that a student must be invited to IEP team meetings once transition planning is included, and an age-appropriate transition assessment is a required element. The measurable post-secondary goals begin to drive the IEP once this section is included. I pulled this quote from OSPI's model form. Transition services should be based on the individual student's needs, taking into account the student's strengths, preferences, and interests, and may include instruction, related services, community experiences, the development of employment, and other post-school adult living objectives, and, if appropriate, the acquisition of daily living skills and provision of a functional vocational evaluation. That's a lot to include to make the transition plan a robust program. I also want to highlight these elements of an appropriately robust transition program. It's based on a student's needs, strengths, preferences, and interests. It includes a comprehensive program with specially designed instruction, related services, which might include OT, PT, speech, etc., community experiences, and development of adult living objectives that might include post-secondary education, acquisition of daily living skills, and vocational evaluation and support. Please note that the IEP transition plan is intended to support rather than replace the student's high school and beyond plan. OSPI provides a variety of resource materials, including videos, to further describe how to align these critical documents. You can also access information about high school and beyond planning on the website for the State Board of Education. Remember that this high school and beyond plan is required for all students in Washington. As a parent participant in your child's education, you can ask questions about this planning process to make sure it's robust enough to really help your student get ready for what's coming in the adult world. Often a high school counselor will be the person helping to manage that high school and beyond planning process. Here are some questions you can ask to determine whether the transition plan in the IEP is well designed. Is it age appropriate? Is information provided by multiple sources? Is the target graduation date included? Are the annual goals relevant to the long-term goals? Are those goals specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely? Are they SMART? Do the post-secondary goals consider all areas of life, including employment, further education, independent living, and community engagement? It's also important to consider whether the IEP transition plan includes connections to adult services. So students might be receiving pre-employment transition services from Washington's Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Students who receive services from the Developmental Disabilities Administration may be eligible for school to work if one is available in the area. SMART is an acronym for goal setting in a variety of places. So remember that IEP annual and secondary transition goals can be considered when wondering if they are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and bound by specific time frame. Here are a few considerations. To practice self-advocacy, a student can start to lead all or part of an IEP meeting. Additionally, the family can invite support people such as DVR or DDA case managers. You could invite special services staff from a university or a college or a technical school. Remembering that once there is a transition plan in the IEP, that drives all the goals and programming. Families will need also to plan for age of majority. When a student turns 18, they accept all of their educational responsibilities unless other plans are made in writing. Our agency, PAVE, provides tools to help families get ready for a meeting with the school. For instructions to create a handout for the team meeting, refer to an article on our website called Get Ready for Your Meeting with a Handout for the Team. Pictured here is the top half of that sample handout. Asking the student a few open-ended questions about how things are going and what might help can provide training in self-advocacy. The student can attend all or part of the IEP meeting, and as I mentioned earlier, might even lead that meeting. On our website, we also have an article called Attention Students, Lead Your Own IEP Meetings and Take Charge of Your Future that might provide a starting place. Pictured here is the bottom of the sample handout. This section is for the student to list their own specific concerns. These are just prompts that might help the student get started. Certainly, they can include any of their own original thoughts and requests here. If the student is ready and able to command the educational programming and planning at 18, then nothing needs to happen. If the student still wants parents involved, then the student signs a letter of consent for parents to attend meetings and continue participating in the IEP. This may be the first permission slip that your child signs for you. Families may want to clarify what specific roles and powers parents will retain under whatever arrangement is designed by the family and the school. The Special Services Office may be able to help. Remember that without legal guardianship or power of attorney, the student will need to sign consent after age 18 for parents to continue to participate. This slide is a list of simple questions that families might use to inspire conversations about the future with the student. Each of these open-ended questions relates to a specific part of the IEP. You could make this a group activity, or if the student is able and wants to write or draw responses to the questions, you could do that first and then talk about the answers. This can be done again and again to stimulate brainstorming about the future. The students' answers contribute directly to the IEP transition plan and educational services that are provided with relevance to the future. So here are the three questions. 1, where am I now? What am I good at? What do I like? Number 2, where do I want to go? What are my dreams, my expectations? Number 3, how do I get there? My goals, courses, activities, support people. How am I going to overcome any barriers that might be perceived so that I can achieve my life in my design? A phrase worth considering is this: presume competence. If the IEP team approaches its work from the attitude that the student is competent and capable, how does that presumption help frame a conversation about how to help a student build on strengths and overcome barriers? How might this question influence conversations about a student's placement, access to the least restrictive environment, and who and how is supporting a robust transition plan? This slide lists the basic components of pre-employment transition services available from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. An article about DVR on PAVE's website provides more detail, but the basic elements include job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling about higher education options and how to gear up for college, workplace readiness training, and instruction in self-advocacy. Like special education rights, vocational rehabilitation rights remain intact despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Pre-employment transition services are intended for secondary school students with disabilities as part of the DVR Secondary School Transition Program. This website page allows you to find out the name and phone number for the DVR counselor that has been assigned to your student's school in Washington State. Note that students with disabilities are defined as having either an IEP or a 504 plan, or they're still receiving school district services in some capacity. Person-centered planning is another tool available to support young people making their life plans. This Start Now Transition Training series that we're launching tonight will include more information about person-centered planning. PAVE also provides more information on our website, including this short video. Excuse me. So this is a quick glance at what person-centered planning might include. This vision board was created by a young woman named Hannah, and this is who she is as a person. A person-centered plan looks different for everyone, and this is just one unique example of how to be creative about this tool. A star chart was another aspect of person-centered planning that Hannah chose to use. She built this one with some help from her family. Kevin's Law is worth knowing about. Kevin's Law allows any student receiving special education services to participate in high school graduation ceremonies with the students that they've gone through school with, even if they plan to stay in school through age 21. Note that the IEP specifically states when the student's target graduation date will be. The school doesn't have to withhold credits for a student to keep receiving an education through 21. The IEP team determines what graduation pathway the student will follow to earn a diploma. And Washington State's graduation pathways have been newly written and are still being revised and interpreted at the state level. School staff also recommend that families plan early for any senior year activities, regardless of what those might look like in the coming year and years. We're going to transition into some resource slides. This is a screenshot of our homepage. PAVE's Parent Training and Information Center is a federally funded program to provide one-on-one support, training, and information for free to Washington State parents, youth, and professionals who want to better understand how to navigate educational services. So to scan through articles and resources, you could click Learning in School on our homepage. Our website is wapave.org. So if you're looking at the slide, the blue arrow is pointing to the Learning in School tab. You can also search for articles by typing a keyword such as high school or transition into the search bar and then click the orange search button. To get one-to-one technical assistance, the blue box on the right side of our homepage taskbar says Get Help. By clicking Get Help, you can fill out a helpline request form and request individualized assistance. Here's a list of our contact information. In addition to finding us online at wapave.org, you could call us toll free at 800-572-7266. 7368. And we do have language interpretation services available. We also have a Facebook page, Parent Training and Information of Washington. If you do access the PDF of this presentation, which was submitted to all registrants for this event, these are live links that would take you to various material that we've generated in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. This slide is a list of resources available to Washington families. I call it Get Help from PAVE and the 3 O's. As I've said, PAVE provides one-to-one assistance. Also available with help is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Office of the Educational Ombuds, which is an aspect of the state governor's office, and the Office for Civil Rights, especially if you have questions about equity and access. Additional resources for families in Washington includes Open Doors for multicultural families up in the Seattle area, the Arc of Washington, which has a state agency and 10 local chapters. And some school districts have special education parent advisory councils or special education parent teacher associations. You can ask your district what's available. This website is called youthhood.org. It's designed by students for students and a great place for transition age kiddos to get some support. Also available to help families working with the school is an agency called the Transition Assessment and Goal Generator, TAG. And they provide some specific assistance when developing an IEP transition plan. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, OSERS, is the federal agency that provides guidance about transition. And again, if you access a PDF, this is a live link and you could go to that lengthy federal guide about transition process. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a moment and take questions, but just a quick review over what we've covered this evening. Student rights, what to do during COVID, planning for adult life, and a little bit about self-advocacy and additional resources. I just want to remind everyone that PAVE is not a legal agency and we cannot provide legal advice or recommendations. And I want to thank you so much for being here and supporting your students. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can all join in the gallery. And I'm happy to take questions as part of the second segment of this training.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for being here. And thank you so much for the really useful and wonderful information. There was one question that came, we have someone who's joined us.
I see, hi cutie.
We have a question that came through the chat that I'm gonna just address, and then also want to direct people to some really good information in response to the question that came through the chat from Trish Bisher from Clark County. So DVR has a long wait list, and they've been on the wait list. This person has been on the wait list working on it since 2018. And so just wondering if you have any ways that you can navigate that. So thank you so much.
I do. The article on PAVE's website addresses this as well. So if you went to our website and typed DVR or vocational rehabilitation into the search bar, you would find information related to what I'm about to say. It's a little technical, so please bear with me. Pre-employment transition services are required, and under the WIOA, Workers Innovation Opportunities Act that passed a few years ago, DVR is required to spend 15% of its budget on pre-employment transition services. So students who basically fill out a consent form and demonstrate that they do have a disability can access pre-employment transition services without being put on a wait list. There is no wait list if they apply for pre-employment transition services first. One-to-one support from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is in what's called order of selection. That's the wait list. If you request one-to-one support first and get waitlisted, you can also get waitlisted for pre-employment transition services. But if you apply for the pre-employment services first, you can't get waitlisted for those. You still might get waitlisted for the one-to-one support. And order of selection depends on the disability circumstance. So there are different levels of disability, and those with the highest needs are going to go to the top of the list. So I'm not sure of the individual circumstances here, but the family might try to seek pre-employment services if the student is still enrolled in school. We shouldn't have been put on a wait list for pre-employment services unless the student applied for individual one-to-one assistance first. So if they got waitlisted for pre-employment services and had not already applied for one-to-one assistance, then I would suggest consulting with a supervisor at DVR. And if that navigation doesn't go anywhere, seek my help, because I spoke directly with a DVR regional support specialist in pre-employment transition services, and she made that very clear to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and anyone who wants to is welcome to contact me on this or any other question. Let me go to make sure I'm sending this to everyone. It's easy. It's jclark@wapave.org, but I just stuck it in the chat if anybody wants to save that email address. Any other questions?
So Jerry, there are no other questions at this moment. So with that, thank you so much for your great presentation. Again, the materials were sent out. Beth McKinney posted your PowerPoint into the chat box, and we're going to take a 5-minute break, everyone, and then we're going to resume with some information about the different transition and educational programs that are happening in the community. So thank you so much, Jerry. I want to jump in, and we're going to shift gears a little bit and invite our next panelists to join the conversation. So we have Aaron Curtin joining us this evening from Vancouver School District, and then Todd, and Todd, I'm going to have you say your last name so you can pronounce it correctly. And then I will let you each describe kind of the overview of what's going on in your district, and then we'll allow people to ask questions of both Todd and Aaron, and then also if you have any questions for Jerry that came up as well. So thanks so much.
Emily, do we get our video put back on?
There we go.
Oh, yes, well, we're working at the video glitches. So thank you again, everyone. As the first event of the year, we all know that we are working out the beautiful glitches that come with technology. So thanks for riding the wave with us.
My video has come on and I am projecting purple, so this is exciting tonight.
Did you want to go first, Erin, then, or do you want me?
I can go first. Maybe we can take turns a little bit as well as we, kind of probably talk about different things. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Erin Curtin. I am a special services manager for Vancouver Public Schools, and I support and supervise all of the special education programs for our comprehensive high schools and also our Flex Academy. To give a description of myself, I am about 5'4". I've got long brown hair, and tonight, for some reason, I am purple, but not typically. And I guess to start off, I'll just give a very brief overview. I'm hoping that all of you will ask questions and help guide our conversation in terms of what your needs are, what your wonderings are, questions, and we can dive deeper that way. In Vancouver Public Schools, we have a variety of programs and services to support all of our students in reaching, their unique learning goals and lifelong goals. We're very focused starting even at birth. Our services are birth to 21, and even starting from birth, we're really focused on individualizing our programs and making sure that we're preparing our students for successful transition into adulthood. Our programs include learning support programs, specialized programs. We do have programs for transitional skills as well as early childhood on the other side of the age spectrum. And we also have a day treatment center within our programming that we support students with as well. So there is a wide continuum and variety of ways that we support students. In terms of, I'm wondering if there might be questions around the pandemic and COVID-19 and how that's impacted services. So please feel free to ask those questions as well. In Vancouver Public Schools, we asked all of our case managers or teachers to reach out to every family and student in our district and have what we called a fall meeting. And in that meeting, we looked at a lot of the things that Jerry Clark was discussing today in terms of what happened during the school closure last spring. Did students make progress? Did they struggle to engage in learning, or were they highly engaged? We also asked questions around what supports families need, and if remote learning is something that's working for students or not. So if you're a part of our district, you are probably a part of one of those fall conferences, kind of like an additional IEP meeting almost, to really plan for the school year for each of our students. So that's something a little bit different that we wouldn't necessarily do every single year at the start of the school year, that we did to address some of the concerns around the way that COVID-19 is impacting schools. I don't know if there's anything else specific. Let's see here. I see something already. Yes, so I see something from Jerry about describing services that are helping families struggling with behavior during learning time and or school refusal. That was definitely something that we talked about in our fall meetings, but I do want to let families know that we are using our behavior support specialists as well as our BCBAs to really join our teams. I think, we always say that that school home connection is you know, incredibly important in everything we do. And with COVID-19, it's become critical. And so we are really trying to make sure that our families have access to the same level of supports that we would be providing to students. So we definitely have BCBAs consulting with families about specific behaviors that are happening in the home, or our behavior specialists. A lot of our specialists and teachers are creating visual schedules or different kinds of behavioral supports, again, to support students if they're working remotely. We also have some students accessing in-school services. And so that's another piece in how we're supporting families. I think my advice would be to reach out to your IEP team immediately if you feel that you're really struggling with behavior in the home, or your students are not engaging in remote learning, and partner with us to figure that out. I'll also mention before I turn it over to Todd, sorry, I just thought of another thing. I didn't have a good script. We also have created a family resource website that's located on our district website that has all kinds of videos around just all kinds of family needs that have come up through our parent conversations, including COVID safety with PPE and how to describe that to students, hand washing videos, but also how to do school in the home setting. A lot of questions that have come up from parents around that. So there's a lot of behavioral videos. We also put all of our training series available online there as well. So if you missed something, you can catch it there recorded.
All right, and I'm Todd Karnofsky, and I'm a program coordinator for special education with Evergreen Public Schools. I support middle schools, high schools, and the transition program. And very much similar to Aaron, with Vancouver Public Schools, where we offer a wide range of services from early childhood all the way through age 21. For those students who need additional time to work on their post-secondary goals. And our district's focus is on access for all, and that is not just a special education initiative, it's a general education initiative as well as for everyone. And a big piece of that is starting transition planning at the age of 13, in alignment with the high school and beyond planning requirements, and making sure that our students' IEPs are reflective of what their future goals are, and giving them opportunities as early as 8th grade to start experiencing classes and opportunities to work towards that later engagement beyond post-secondary. And in these times of the pandemic, as far as behaviors go, we do have a department under our teaching and learning department that focuses on social emotional learning. And what they do is they support all our schools around making sure that social emotional learning is a huge part of what we do in every lesson, and not just those that are dictated to social emotional or social skills. And so then there's different routines and expectations in each and every teaching lesson that's part of that larger social emotional learning for all our students. And then very much similar to what Aaron talked about with BCBAs, which stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. And those are certificated staff members who have advanced training in applied behavior analysis, or ABA. And they work with different IEP teams to focus on student routines and expectations. And very similar to what Aaron said, if you're struggling or wondering some things about how to best support behavior with a student in a remote setting, then definitely contact your IEP case manager and set up a meeting to discuss that.
So a question came in to me, and I'm wondering if whoever wants to answer it first, and then if you could take turns, but if you'd be willing to share a success story. I know it's new in the school year, but maybe something within the last couple of years of, someone graduating with a job, or just kind of the success of your program and after. Thanks.
You're talking about the special ed program, Emily, sorry, just to be more specific, or the transition program, or both?
I think, well, it was a little broad, so maybe both.
Okay. Do you want me to go first on this, Erin, or do you want, okay. So I what's interesting is today is a day where I started supporting our high schools with what they call the Leaver survey. So every school in the state of Washington has to call former students a year after they leave our public education system to check in to see if they're engaged beyond high school. And the ways that they can be engaged include employment and on-the-job training or education. And that is one of my favorite times of the year because what Emily's asking us about was the success story. It's always nice to make that phone call to those students and see what they have been doing a year after they left our system. And so it was really neat to call a student today and see that not only is he working full-time, but he's able to, he just recently got promoted in his job and is doing something that he's very passionate about and working for a great company that's supportive of his needs, was willing to train him, and all that work that we did with advocating for different accommodation for him and then teaching him those accommodations were really helpful in the workplace because he let them know, of his disability, of certain things that he may need some additional help with or additional time to think or respond to. And what I learned today was that the company that he works with in our community has been very responsive to that, and therefore he's being successful, which is awesome.
I'm gonna jump in and build off of what Todd shared, and I'm glad he mentioned the phone calls. This is my third year of doing the phone calls where we call every family a year after students have left our programs. And I've been the primary person to make the phone calls for the last 3 years. It's a lot of phone calls, and it's one of my favorite things to do. Because I do get to hear lots of success stories of students. And I think, just to be a little bit biased, my favorite ones are always the ones I call and I recognize who were previous students of my own when I taught elementary or middle school. And so that ages me a little bit, but also it's my favorite thing is to hear the successes that they're having as young adults. And we do have a lot of those successes. I know Todd shared one about employment, so I'll share one about educational opportunities after high school. We partner often with colleges, both four-year and community colleges, to help students transition into those educational programs. And one of the ways that we support students is to talk about sharing their IEPs that they've had through the school experience, taking it to their universities and working with disability services to really make sure that those same learning accommodations are in place to support them with their post-secondary education plans. And we've had some fantastic success stories. One recently of a student who I supported, who just graduated with her associates and is now accepted into Washington State University, and very excited to pursue her next steps, which she'd like to go into law enforcement. So she's looking at some different types of, I don't know all the details, but criminal based field. But you know, in supporting the, you know, the legal and all of those pieces, and helping the community. So we have a lot of success stories. I would say that one of the ways to help ensure those fantastic outcomes is to make sure that the student is really driving those transition plans and their high school and beyond plans, because that allows our teams to really collaborate with you and our kids to make sure that the services that they're receiving, that the skills that they're developing are all lining up for their success and what their goals are for adulthood. So
Great. Oh, so just a reminder came in for all of us, and that we need to slow down when we answer questions. So I'm reminding myself as I answer this question. So thank you on the other track. And then a couple of things in the chat. Trish pointed out a link to a video of essential workers that were at that was created at our recent, or excuse me, at Clark County's recent employment celebration of the National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So that's in the link. And then a question came in, if I believe it was Todd and Aaron, you use the acronym BCH or BCA. If you could describe that acronym, I will just give the acronym with the meaning, and then also a collaboration, or talk about a successful collaboration of DVR and pre-employment transition services to support someone to get a job.
I think it's my turn to go first. So BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst. And these are our specialists who have gone through intensive training and certifications to support teams with analyzing behavior and creating intervention plans. I don't know, Todd, if there's anything you want to add to that description.
Maybe a little bit about what they do in our district. In Evergreen, they support buildings by helping with tier 1 strategies, and what they call tier 1 strategies are basic classroom management strategies that we would hope to see across all classrooms, which could look like a visual that is put up about those classroom expectations. They could support a classroom. So if they're coming into a classroom, they might do some observations. They're going to also look at those tier 1 strategies and routines. And then they can also do student-specific behavior consults, which could include observation of a student's behavior, consulting with the IEP case manager on data collection. They could even attend student IEP meetings to discuss the plans, and also be part of that team when they look at the behavior intervention planning that goes on.
Thank you. In Vancouver, we also use them to support teams with coming up with additional interventions for students who may have behaviors where there is an intensity or frequency of behavior that is, you know, creating an unsafe situation, or something where we're struggling to come up with different ideas. They are our go-to specialists. In terms of partnership with DVR, you know, I wish that some of my teachers were here to speak a little bit more in detail to that, to the partnership that they have. But what I do know is that a lot of our teachers will invite DVR counselors to all of the IEP meetings that they have for the year. One of our strategies is to plan those meetings out in advance, because we do need to give them advance time to be able to make it to those meetings. So oftentimes teachers will plan for IEPs, even that will happen in the spring, in the fall. They'll schedule it for the spring, in the fall, so that we can guarantee that we can get some of those community supports and agencies involved with our planning to best support students as we plan for their transition. We also have had some partnerships, I know, with DVR, where they have done trainings for our staff and done informational sessions with our both teachers and para educators around ways to support students with the transition into post-secondary.
For collaboration with DVR and Evergreen, we see at the high schools the use of applying for that pre-employment services, and have seen some good success in that. One of the biggest things for us was confirming that we actually have a lot of transition services in our high schools that are very similar to what DVR is providing through their pre-employment services. And that was really a confirming and helpful process with DVR. And then at the transition program, when a student's in their final year, a DVR representative will attend their IEPs meetings, and most of the time the students have applied for DVR. And so the nice thing about those meetings is then we can partner with them about, you know, what is going to occur as the students then exiting the transition program, and where might DVR be able to support that next step. And that can look a variety of ways. I mean, our goal in the transition program is that our students leave, all leave engaged in some way. And so oftentimes they don't necessarily need DVR right away because they're already attending college, or they already have paid employment, which is nice. But for those few that maybe need that additional support as they leave the public education system, they you know, they know they have a partner with DVR to help them.
Thank you both so much for those answers. I'm wanting to open it up to the chat too. If there's anyone who has any questions in the chat, please feel free to answer.
Hi there, this is Trish. Hey, I just also wanted to mention that the Job Foundation project that I mentioned earlier is an example of a collaboration between DVR and the school districts. The Division of Voc Rehab, Developmental Disabilities Administration, and the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction came together to develop this project. And this is a collaboration that also involves our local school districts, as well as our local DVR office and the county. So hopefully we'll have lots of success stories to share about that next year. We're just kicking off the first year of that right now, actually. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Trish. And also you posted some links to some more videos. If people haven't had a chance to click on that, that is excellent.
I'll pop on just because everybody's so quiet. I've worked with some families in IEP process when they're developing transition plans, and they don't always feel like they knew all this stuff. They don't always feel like somebody told them, oh, DVR has this thing called pre-employment transition services. They don't always feel like somebody suggested that they bring all of these different agencies to the table. So maybe you two could talk about what the districts that you work for are doing proactively to teach parents about these options so that they don't have to show up on a Tuesday night in a WISE training on Zoom to get this information, but they might actually have somebody going, please, can I help you?
Sorry, is it my turn to go first, Erin?
Sure.
I'm trying to follow the pattern, the routine that we're setting. So I guess one of the things that we do is we have a disabilities services timeline sheet that IEP teams can provide parents at IEP meetings, how each school goes about distributing that and talking about that with the parents. Generally is up to a school having their own process, or that individual case manager, as I know at a couple schools. There's a point in the conversation where they need to embed that. Hopefully not at the very end. It would be my hope.
I'm glad you asked that question, Jerry. That's always one of our goals as well, is how to increase the communication and the information and the really two-way, I want to stress two-way communication between our families and school teams, and getting information that they need, and also responding to how we can best support that. This year we are starting something new for our secondary families. It's going to be called, just like it sounds, secondary parent collaboration nights. And it will be myself, Kelly Nye, who is our district autism specialist, and one of our BCBAs, or will be there, and we will be doing some discussion-led just time together where we can really assess what the needs are of our families and get that information out there. We want it to be that two-way though, because sometimes we think we know there's a need and we send something out and parents have had access to that. Families know about that and really their questions are around something else. So this is an opportunity for us to partner with our families and really get that information. And there'll be a Zoom sign up for that, and it will start in January after the holiday break, so the winter break. So that's one additional way. We do have some resources on our website. But again, I would encourage families to reach out to your IEP teams. You can reach out to us. You can know that we are partners in this planning with you. And one thing, even though I have the high school lens right now, it's never too early to start these conversations with your teams. And so even if you are an elementary parent, start having these conversations, because as I've learned actually through this parent training series, I've learned new things as well. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of different agencies. There's a lot of steps to take. And so the sooner that you are involved in that, I think the more empowered you are to really advocate for your students and partner with teams as well.
I wanted to share one more tip that I got when I interviewed the DVR regional counselor about pre-employment transition services. She helped me understand that students as young as 14 can have access to pre-employment transition services if the IEP includes a transition plan. So the IEP transition plan is required by the school year when a student turns 16, but there's nothing that says the family, student, and school need to wait to age 16. They can insert that transition plan anytime the student and the family are ready. So if the transition plan is developed by age 14, the family and or the school in collaboration can reach out to DVR and request those pre-employment transition services as young as age 14. For students who don't have an IEP, so maybe they have a Section 504 plan or another identified disability condition that might qualify them for pre-employment transition services, they have to be 16. But students with an IEP transition plan can be 14 and start accessing those services, according to DVR counselor that I talked to.
Thanks for adding that, Jerry. And I'm so glad that you addressed starting early and building that vision for the future at a young age, because the question that came in was, what was your advice, or what is either of your advice for parents of children who are younger than high school? So I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that or build on that, but starting young and visioning is a really great start.
Well, I think that, there's always the piece of educating, yourself and working with your teams around the community agencies and all the partnerships out there that are going to support, that transition into adulthood. But as a previous elementary school special education teacher, I think it's really important to also start thinking about the things we typically think about with our transition assessments, starting at a young age. Start identifying students' strengths, start identifying their interests. Start looking at the skills that are lifelong skills for them, things like self-advocacy, social communication, these pieces that are going to help support them in any of the goals that their interests lead them towards. Those are all things that we can start as early as preschool. So maybe even earlier than that. So I don't know, that would be my advice, is to really start doing some of those processes around looking at the needs of students, looking at their strengths and interests, and looking at setting those goals for how you develop their skill sets and get them ready for as they transition into secondary school.
I agree with that, Erin, especially if you think about skills in the home that students can practice. And the more they are doing the skills and applying different things, the more they will have built a repertoire of different things that they can use to then generalize to different work sites or whatever in the future, because they can do a certain number of things. Oh, that took me off on another tangent. What was the question again? Sorry.
No, another tangent is a great place to go. But it was what additional advice, or what advice do you have for families who have younger children that are, I guess, students that are middle school and elementary school? And then I also want to point out that there was some questions that came through in the chat box also, and Jerry provided some additional information. So I think you covered it beautifully, Todd. So if over 16 and there isn't the IEP, then the student can still access the pre-employment services. And then Jerry, you added that if that's the case, contacting a DVR regional counselor would be a great way to ask those questions. But the IEP is not a requirement.
Oh, and then Emily, I just wanted to add, sorry, I do remember something now that I wanted to share is that partnering with parents is so crucial. So, you know, when we partner with parents, doesn't mean that the school always have to have the information. So when we think about students that who are earlier age and a parent has gone to a parent family training series like this and wants to see how they can work with the school and that community agency, bringing those functional examples are really important to the school teams as well. And parents can educate school team members on this, on community agencies too.
Thank you so much. I'm doing the shift that many of you on this webinar know of the working parent dance who's working from home for the family training series with 2 small children versus being in person, which hopefully someday soon we will all be together. And then Jerry, thank you for adding resources to the chat. I'm wondering if both you, Todd, and Aaron, you've mentioned to resources on your website. I'm wondering if you would be willing to put those into the chat as well, if those haven't made it in there, or we can also email those out to families afterwards.
Todd, I don't know if you're more tech savvy than me. It might be easier for me to find those and send them to you, Emily, to send out as an email resources from the conversation, if that's okay.
That's excellent.
Okay.
So we're nearing the end of our evening, and before we part ways, I want to invite everyone who's in this session to please, if there's any last minute questions, put those in the chat for Jerry or Todd or Aaron, and then remind you that this is the first of the whole family training series that will be happening through 2021. And we would love to see you and continue to see you throughout the school year. We will be providing a survey for this training series, just so it helps us with data to know how we can continue to improve and make this series better. So please help us by filling the SurveyMonkey link that you receive at the end of this. Jerry also noted that there is a great resource to engage students in their IEPs at, let's see, was it imdetermined.org. Oh, and excellent. And Teresa put the resource in. Thank you for Vancouver School District. Excellent.
The imdetermined.org includes a worksheet that students can use to track their own goals and their own progress toward their goals. That could be used for annual IEP goals and or secondary goals. So that page that I put in the chat would get you there eventually if you kind of looked around. But you could also reach out to me if you wanted me to just send you that worksheet. But it's a great way. We were talking about getting students started early in their own self-advocacy and their own life planning. Getting engaged in their own IEP goals is a way to start that very young. And so if students can really understand what they're working on, what they're mastering, what their successes include, what they can be proud of, all of that feeds directly into that transition process and programming. So as early as possible, I shared some student self-advocacy tips with I think he was like a 3rd grader one time. And bless his heart, he got into that IEP meeting and he had questions and he had suggestions and he was on fire, ready to advocate for his own needs and interests. And what a change for that little kiddo who didn't have any idea before that what his IEP even meant to him. So as everyone here on the panel has said, it's never too early to start that process. And it's also never too late. So if your kiddo is 17 and you're going, dang, we don't even have an IEP transition plan yet, start now. That's the name of the series, right? Start now, start now.
Well, there's no additional questions that have come through. If there's any last bit of wisdom from Todd or Aaron, I feel like Jerry, that you really start now. You tied it together and you tied it to the series. So I feel like that was a really beautiful bit of advice. But if either Aaron or Todd, you have anything else to add, that's wonderful, and we'd love to hear from you. And again, last minute questions in the chat.
Hard to follow Jerry on that one. But
It was
thank you for
good. Yeah.
having us tonight.
I just
Okay.
want to thank everybody and you know, remind you that we're partners in this work, and we love that partnership. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to your teams and ask questions. We're here to support you and work with you to really ultimately to support your kiddos. That's why we do what we do. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Aaron and Jerry and Todd, for your time this evening, and for everyone who showed up on this Tuesday evening to be here with us for this first event of the year. We're excited to continue the conversation with all of you as we move forward throughout this training series. We hope that you will continue to register for these events. And please, if there's any questions that come up after the training, we will get them to the specific panelists as needed. So thank you all so much. We'll leave the room open for a few minutes if there's anyone who has a last lingering thought, that we hope you get safely to where you need to be, whatever that may look like after this training. So take care, everyone. Thank you.